Looking at the COP29 conference, I have to really doubt that the Aliyev dictatorship saw this as a success for them, seeing that controversy over the government's abominable human rights record dogged the run-up to the conference. Many countries did not participate in the conference or sent low-level delegations. Also, in the run-up to the conference, most press reporting did include significant mention of the government's worsening brutality toward both ethnic Azerbaijanis and Armenians. For that low level of participation, we have to thank the many brave human rights defenders who, often at great risk to themselves, created focus on the regime's horrific human rights abuses. Regarding internal repression, Maidan TV reported in February a total of 357 political prisoners in Azerbaijan. This is a significantly increased number over recent years. I'd like to, as Ertuk, if you could begin your testimony, and then please, I know we often try to keep it short. This is so important. Whatever time you need to take all four of our witnesses, please take it. We need to get this not just on the record, but out to as many people. And this is being broadcast to many places. So please take your time in presenting that testimony. We need to hear it.
I've come before you not only as a human rights defender, but also as a survivor of a people who in the 21st century have faced complete eradication of their history, their culture, and their physical existence in their homeland. Grown up blind and orphaned as a result of the tragic conflict in my homeland, I know intimately the value of peace, the price of conflict, and the importance of fundamental human rights and dignity. Within 3 years, Azerbaijan successfully perpetrated a full genocide against my people, Armenians of Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. And this was not a sudden tragic. This was a deliberate and methodical operation with effective humanitarian blockade and starvation, with military assaults, with killings of civilian population, with unlawful abduction and imprisonment of our leaders and other compatriots, with destruction of cultural heritage and many other mass atrocities. What we have now, today, we have over 150,000 indigenous Armenians just forcibly displaced and deprived of any opportunity to return our homeland, and having lots of destruction and mass human rights violations back in our homeland. We have over 6,000 Armenian and Christian cultural and religious heritage monuments under Azerbaijani destruction, desecration, and threat of destruction. We have at least 23 officially confirmed Armenian hostages held under Azerbaijani imprisonment and unlawful sentence and being subjected to torture. And we have also, since 2020 and 2023, over 200 missing persons, over 80 enforced disappearances, and Azerbaijan doesn't give any information about their fate. And in this situation, we have international investigations like by Freedom House, by International Association of Genocide Scholars, and many others, assessing these events as ethnic cleansing and genocide. In this light, I would respectfully urge the US Congress to do several actions. Firstly, formally recognize the genocide of the Artsakh people as a continuation of the Armenian genocide. Secondly, support any international and national investigation and prosecution against all the people, all the persons responsible for mass atrocities against our people. Thirdly, impose targeted sanctions against all of those individuals and Azerbaijani officials who are responsible for these mass atrocities. And those sanctions can be travel bans, asset freezes, and many others. Fourthly, stop any kind of U.S. military support and supply to Azerbaijan. Fifthly, condition any kind of U.S. assistance to Azerbaijan on measurable human rights improvements, including the release of the Armenian hostages there. Sixthly, initiate or support international monitoring mission to Artsakh in order to document the situation of our cultural heritage and our property, and also to assess the conditions for our safe, dignified, and sustainable return to our land. And seventhly, elevate diplomatic pressure over Azerbaijan to ensure its compliance with International Court of Justice rulings, and also to ensure our return to our homeland with robust international protection mechanisms.
The idea of prosecution, if ever there was a time where we need a court, whether it be the ICC, which sadly has not produced all that much over the years, but maybe hope springs eternal on that, or a hybrid court like we had in Yugoslavia or Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone especially being an amazingly effective court, there needs to be that kind of creation to hold Aliyev and his murderous regime to account. So thank you for that testimony, for your courage, and for providing us that very important list.
In short, while President Aliyev has worked hard to create a global image that he is a statesman, a peacemaker, and a leader on interreligious dialogue, he is in fact a dictator who has ruled his people with an iron fist since 2003. You don't have to take my word for it. The independent reviews of his leadership could not be any more damning. According to Freedom House's Freedom in the World Report 2025, Azerbaijan received a total score of 7 out of 100, putting it between Afghanistan and Belarus. Aliyev was most recently, quote, re-elected in February 2024 in an election widely criticized and panned as neither free nor fair. In addition, according to the Union for the Freedom of Political Prisoners, Azerbaijan today holds 357 political prisoners, which doesn't even include the Armenian Christians. Transparency International ranked Azerbaijan as 154 out of 100 countries in the world in its Corruption Perceptions Index, and it highlighted in its reporting that the regime spent, quote, millions and millions of euros on bribing individuals capable of shaping public opinion in democratic countries. And Reporters Without Borders ranked Azerbaijan as 164 out of 180 countries in the world. It should come as no surprise that since COP29 last November, Aliyev has only tightened his grip on power, believing the world is distracted with the conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza, and elsewhere. But it is up to all of us here today to make sure that that is not allowed to be the case. Now let me turn my attention to Nagorno-Karabakh more specifically. In September of 2023, Aliyev launched an ethnic cleansing campaign of the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, forcing 120,000 ethnic Armenian Christians to flee into Armenia, dissolving its institutions, and decapitating and imprisoning its leadership. It has been more than 18 months since my client, Ruben Vardanyan, was detained by Azerbaijan. A devout Armenian Christian and respected philanthropist and businessman, Ruben was taken as a political prisoner in September of 2023. His actual crime? Simply advocating for the dignity and the rights of self-determination of the Armenian Christian people of Nagorno-Karabakh, a region in the South Caucasus that Armenians call Artsakh. Since the ethnic cleansing, Azerbaijan has only accelerated its long-standing efforts to sweep away any trace of Armenian Christian presence in the region. In a report published last year, the Center for Truth and Justice documented numerous examples from among the 500 historic sites and 6,000 Armenian monuments, including churches and monasteries, which have been desecrated or destroyed. And Ruben's ongoing imprisonment remains a powerful symbol of Aliyev's ongoing brutality. He faces life in prison if convicted by the Baku military court on more than 40 fabricated charges. The allegations against him are patently outrageous, As just one example, Rubin co-founded and served on the board of directors of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, an independent NGO that helps people in need around the world. Yet Azerbaijan has asserted that this NGO, which is independently audited, has been a vehicle for Rubin to finance terrorism. His trial has also been a mockery of justice with egregious due process abuses, including the illegal trial in a military court, lack of access to a fully translated indictment and all alleged evidence, secret hearings closed to the public, and denial of access to me as his international lawyer. Along the way, despite Aliyev's claims that Rubin is a terrorist and his imprisonment has nothing to do with him being an Armenian Christian, Rubin has been repeatedly denied access to the Bible. And he was subjected to torture during the first of 2 hunger strikes he conducted to protest his imprisonment and that of the other Armenian Christian prisoners. There is a glimmer of hope with respect to the Armenian Christian political prisoners, at least. Azerbaijan and Armenia have reportedly agreed to most of the terms of a peace deal. President Trump, when running for president last October, put out a Truth Social post where he said that what Aliyev had done in Nagorno-Karabakh was an ethnic cleansing, and he said that if elected, he would stand for persecuted Christians. It's therefore heartening that President Aliyev has been told by the most senior officials in the Trump administration that the Armenian Christian prisoners need to be released either before or as part of any peace agreement. That said, dictators never release prisoners because they are asked, only when they have to, and only when it is the least worst choice among a number of bad options. Therefore, to compel Aliyev to release the prisoners, I would begin by associating myself with the recommendations that Artak just made a moment ago. But in addition, the Trump administration, the U.S. Congress, such as Mr. Chairman, your efforts to introduce and advance the Azerbaijan Democracy Act, and other like-minded regional organizations, governments, NGOs, and the media around the world must take both public and private action to demonstrate that there will be real and serious consequences if Aliyev fails to act. It isn't just that Rubin is a hero to his people and to so many others around the world, but Aliyev has turned the truth on its head, not only to imprison Rubin, but to justify the entire ethnic cleansing of a people. It is up to all of us to stand in solidarity with them, with all of the heroic Azeri human rights defenders, and to hold Aliyev accountable, both directly and through all of the means at our disposal in a democratic society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Genser. And Rubin could not have a more effective advocate than you. And I thank you for that leadership, because you help enlighten all of us in the Congress, because this hearing will be widely shared with members, including our leadership, Mike Johnson. And again, we will look to pivot from today. That's why we waited before we introduced the bill, to get any further insights from you and from all of you. So I want to thank you for that. Ms. Lansko?
Thank you very much, Chairman Smith. I'm very grateful to you for your leadership on human rights, and especially on Azerbaijan, for many, many years. And this is an important hearing. It's important to be talking about Azerbaijan, and I'm honored to be here to talk about repression against civil society. Azerbaijan uses a sophisticated set of diplomatic tactics to blunt international criticism of its kleptocratic and repressive system. In addition to caviar diplomacy, which includes bribes, gifts, and favors for foreign officials and parliamentarians, Azerbaijan is very adept at the use of diplomatic foils to remain in good graces of Western governments, even as it violates every norm and value that should underpin those relationships. In one famous instance, the Italian member of the European Parliament, Luca Volonti, was sentenced to 4 years in jail in Italy for accepting bribes from Azerbaijan. There have been investigations in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe that held accountable and disciplined several of the MEPs, and Azerbaijan eventually lost its seat in that body. There are two reports that I would advise everyone to familiarize themselves with. One is Caviar Diplomacy by the European Stability Initiative. The other one is the Azerbaijan Laundromat by OCCRP, which just documents a system of money laundering, $2 billion that OCCRP was able to document to have favorable political outcomes in Europe. Azerbaijan took a profound authoritarian turn in 2013, adopting legislation hostile to media and civil society and putting many prominent public figures in jail. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Europe has become more and more interested in moving away from Russian oil and gas, and this has given Azerbaijan even more opportunities to use its hydrocarbon assets to preempt attempts at domestic and international accountability. However, as research by Dr. Badoglu indicates, Azerbaijan can only meet increasing demand for gas in Europe through swaps with Russia and Iran. There's a new pipeline being projected from Russia to Iran through Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan recently held military exercises with Iran. Similarly, Azerbaijan uses the peace process with Armenia to avoid accountability for human rights abuses.
Azerbaijan was a troubling choice to host a global climate conference. The oil-rich country's economy and political stability depend heavily on fossil fuel production. Moreover, President Aliyev's authoritarian regime has a long history of political repression, media censorship, and crackdowns on civil society, practices which directly undermine the open, multi-stakeholder environment necessary to achieve COP's goals for climate action and environmental justice. In September 24, Freedom Now therefore organized 50 climate and human rights organizations to launch the Demand Rights at COP campaign to spotlight the regime's abuse of human rights and demand that Azerbaijan address these issues before and during the conference. We warned that if the US and the rest of the international community didn't take concrete steps to hold Aliyev accountable, we would likely see further escalation. 5 months after COP29 ended, I'm sorry to say that we were right. Ironically, the incidence of transnational repression is relatively rare because many journalists and civil society activists can't seek refuge abroad, as the government has imposed travel bans on critics for allegedly having ties to pending criminal cases. In most cases, these individuals are unaware that travel bans even exist until they attempt to leave the country, at which point they're arrested under fabricated charges. This happened to Iqbal Abilov, a member of an Azerbaijani minority group and an academic visiting from Belarus for a wedding. He was not allowed to leave the country in June 2024, and weeks later was arrested on charges of treason. This widespread use of travel bans has effectively made Azerbaijan an open-air prison for many. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan will continue its crackdown on civil society and abuse of human rights unless the US and others take a stronger stance to counter these actions. I have 5 specific recommendations for Congress and the administration that we believe will make a difference to the Aliyev regime. 1, use all public and private diplomatic opportunities to speak out about the worsening situation for civil society and human rights in Azerbaijan, including the cases of political prisoners, and call on the government to correct course. 2nd, condition certain areas of foreign assistance on measurable human rights improvements, including the immediate and unconditional release of political prisoners. I note in particular that although this is a tactic that I think is quite important, often regimes will release 1 or 2 specifically named prisoners to indicate that they have complied. As we've noted, there are more than 350 political prisoners, and while naming each one may not be practical, it is important to demand the release of more than a token number. 3rd, impose targeted sanctions, including travel and financial restrictions against perpetrators of human rights abusers in the government. Sanctions, of course, are available to both the Secretary of State, Congress can recommend sanctions, and of course the President as well. 4th, urge the Azerbaijani government to stop the use and/or threat of criminal prosecution as a tool to suppress critics and repeal or reform restrictive laws and regulations governing NGOs and their funding. This is the lifeblood of civil society in Azerbaijan, which the Aliyev regime has largely cut off. And finally, allocate adequate funding to support independent media, lawyers, and human rights defenders, both in Azerbaijan and in exile.
I'll never forget, right outside this door, about 50 feet down, I ran into, just as a matter of coincidence, the ambassador of Azerbaijan to the United States, and I took the opportunity to raise immediately human rights issues. I had met with Aliyev twice in Baku on 2 different occasions and brought up all of these issues with him, especially the Armenian issues, and he just pretty much blew it all off in a very, very condescending way. I think he wondered who let me in there. I was head of delegation for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, so that helped me get some entree.
Thank you for all those comments, Chairman Smith. And I think the panel also did a brilliant job bringing to light the enormous and gross human rights abuses being committed by Aliyev and his regime. The one piece of good news here is that Aliyev is very, very sensitive to his image. He tracks it very closely. He goes after those who go after him and is highly critical. And that just reinforces for all of us that much can be done, and it's simply a question of political will. You mentioned, for example, the International Criminal Court. Karim Khan, the prosecutor, today actually has the legal authority to open a preliminary examination into Aliyev because of the ethnic cleansing, much like the situation with the Rohingya and they're being pushed out of Burma, Myanmar, into Bangladesh. Armenia, by analogy, like Bangladesh, is a party to the Rome Statute. And the crime against humanity of a forcible population transfer, civilian population transfer across an international border, is one of the crimes under the Rome Statute. So this is something that Karim Khan could do today with his own authority. He has not done it up until now. But obviously states parties to the ICC also have the ability to make a state-to-state referral, which would be something I think that could be quite important and quite effective. I'll just note on Ruben Vardanyan's case that when he conducted a hunger strike, his first hunger strike, he was put into a very small punishment cell, forced to stand for hours on end, was denied food and water for extended periods of time. The lights were on 24/7, and he was cut off from his family for the 3 weeks he was on, and to his counsel for the 3 weeks he was on the hunger strike. So obviously it was an incredibly concerning situation, and we filed a complaint to the UN Special Rapporteur on torture in relation to all the things that had been done to him once he got out of that situation and was able to speak with us further. I'll note that unfortunately, the regime is on a tear in terms of demanding that UN agencies and other institutions like the International Committee of the Red Cross leave Azerbaijan. That's incredibly worrying because the ICRC has really been the only international NGO that's been given regular access to the prisons in Azerbaijan, not just for political prisoners, but also for ordinary prisoners. And I think that this is a terrible turn for the worse that will have a ripple effect in terms of our ability to know what's happening with the prisoners, to have an independent voice there, even though the ICRC, as a matter of policy, doesn't speak out publicly. They've been very active and engaged in pressing the regime privately on a wide array of prison-related issues. And so I think that that's something else we also have to.
The point I wanted to make was access to legal assistance for political prisoners. Often people don't have access to lawyers. You can't get food parcels from anyone other than a direct relative, and in some cases you may not have, if you're in prison, your family may not be there. There might not be people who can bring food and other items to prisoners. And the practice of pretrial detention itself. You can be in pretrial detention for a very long time before ever having due process. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Jared. I mean, we've heard from people who have told us, much worse. They really are fearful for their lives here. And the FBI has even advised them to remain low and not have much visibility because of it, and which is frightening when you think about it. Here they are in the United States, and again, Aliyev has the capability, it would appear, to project his nefarious power on them here. And we know the Chinese Communist Party does it with impunity, and they're probably the most effective at that kind of repression. But Aliyev is in that same league, but maybe a little less so because of the numbers. But let me just ask you, and I do appreciate that you do speak out not just for the Armenians, which we all are deeply, let me say it again, deeply concerned for, including the POWs and the others who have been so horribly mistreated. but you also speak out for the Azerbaijanis. I mean, it's a matter of, this is about humanity. I would hope that the administration would take note of that as well, because one of the things that Aliyev can do and does is to try to whip up the Azerbaijani population against the Armenians through lies and deception and false and propaganda. So, I appreciate everything you're doing along those lines here and every day you fight for human rights in Azerbaijan. Let me just ask you, if I could, about the, again, Ruben again. What more can we do? Should we do a letter from members of Congress to Aliyev? Should we? I mean, the bill I will push very hard. I know that there will be a lobby effort by people on K Street to kill it. That's what happened in the past, because I did have a Azerbaijan Human Rights Democracy Act that I had promoted back in 10 years ago. And it was amazing how they talked to key staffers and members of Congress, both sides of the aisle, to kill it. And it was like, we don't understand what's really going on. Yeah, yes, we do, far too much. And through the eyes and through the scars of the political prisoners, we do understand what a despot and what a dictator Aliyev is, and why don't you? So we're going to be up against a very difficult fight, but it's not one that we can't win. So we're going to do everything we can again. I remember even, I worked very closely with the Armenian Assembly and the other Armenian leadership. I remember when we had had 3 hearings on the Armenian genocide. And I'll never forget, we had because we wanted to hear from the Turkish side. So we had an ambassador sit at the table along with the Armenians. And even though the facts of the Armenian genocide are absolute, anyone who, it's like saying the Holocaust didn't happen. It's a denial that is only brings dishonor on the denier. And we had a situation where right from the podium there, or right from the table of our testimony, the Turkish ambassador said, well, we may have to end your base in Incirlik. What kind of NATO ally is that who can't acknowledge Germany did the Holocaust, and thankfully Konrad Adenauer and others, repudiated all of it. There are still some people who don't, but their government, and they're members of good standing of NATO. Turkey still does not acknowledge it. And I met Morgenthau's, our ambassador contemporaneous with the Armenian genocide. I read his book, and I couldn't believe, when you read from a guy that was right there on the scene. And then you have the Turkish ambassador telling us how it doesn't exist. It just begs the question about, that brings dishonor on them.
Successful congressional hearing at the Lantos Human Rights Commission on human rights situation in Azerbaijan. And I am honored that I had that opportunity to testify before the Commission on the violations and mass atrocities against the Armenian people, including the ongoing ones. And in addition to that, I had an opportunity in the last days to talk with the Armenian community in Illinois and Connecticut